Okay, so now we will be studying about the next sector in the book, that is that section is your poetry. So the first poem is Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy. So first, talking about the author. So Thomas Hardy was born at Higher Bonkhampton near Dorchester, and later as a young man worked as an architect. Although Hardy's fame now chiefly rests on his novels, because he has written wonderful number of novels and really interesting ones. So when you are talking about his work, so he used to write about something which is related to the uh, ironic contrivances of fate on human love, especially in wider perspective of fleeting time. Okay, so his vision is tragic but humane. His tone is sympathetic, and his diction that of everyday speech is worse. Okay, so some of the novels which he has written are Madding Crowd, The Mayor of Casterbridge, and his collection of poetry includes Wessex poems and other verses, Moments of Vision, and winter words in various moods and meters. Okay, so when talking about Neutral Tones, so it was written in 1867. So it is one of the Hardy's earlier works, and it is appeared in the collection of Wessex poems and verses, and it is one of the most popular versions written by Thomas Hardy. And this poem depicts the end of a relationship, and it is very emotional in tone, and it reflects the negativity that is actually the USP in Hardy's works. Okay, so talking about the poem, so the speaker begins by referencing a memory about a particular winter's day. So the speaker and the addressee of the poem, a former lover, were standing by a pond beneath a sun that seemed bleached white as though it had been scalded by bird. So a few grey leaves were scattered on the ground fallen from an ash tree. So the poem says, we stood by a pond that winter day, and the sun was white as though chidden, means scolded of God, and a few leaves lay on a starving sword that had fallen from an ash and were grey. So the speaker comments that the ex-lover, eyes looked bored as they gazed upon the speaker, as if looking at a tired riddle from long ago. So the two had a short conversation about who had lost more because of the relationship, though line number 8 could also be read as meaning that this specific conversation itself actively diminished the amount of love between the two people. So it says, your eyes on me were as eyes that rove, are tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. So the speaker then mentions the ex-lover's smile on that particular day, describing it as almost dead, but with just enough life left to allow it to finally die in this moment. It was bitter smile which the speaker compares to a fearsome bird taking flight. So the poem says, the smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a-wing. So the last paragraph says, since that day, the speaker has learned that love is deceitful and causes harm. This life lesson stirs the memory of that winter's day. The other person's face, the sun, the pond, the trees, and the fallen leaves. So since then, keen lessons that love deceives and brings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the god crust, the sun and a tree, and a pond edged with a greyish leaf. So this poem, which I have read in front of you, gives you a sense of betrayal. The speaker is clearly bitter about the end of a relationship. The sense of hurt, being gloomy, is being reflected in the settings: a gloomy winter evening, dead leaves, grey leaves. The speaker here remembers the scene with an intense sense of loss, and it is clear that the speaker has been unable to come to terms with the loss or forgive the person with whom he is in love. So it gives you a feeling of despair, bitterness, and so I think there is no room for forgiveness and kindness, as the poem says. So the poem is written in quadric form, and the rhythmic scheme of the poem is ABBA, which is a journal rhythmic scheme. So the themes would be betrayal and love, and the second one is memory. Okay, and how you can consider it as memory? So it is an expression of emotional trauma, and it argues that some emotional events leave a mark on the memory that cannot be erased. Okay, in the poem, pain dulls over time to become a kind of melancholic. Melancholic means sad, boredom, in which the memory of the event is an unwelcome constant in the mind of the speaker. So some events in life, the poem argues, can never be completely, you cannot overcome it. Okay, so this is for the theme memory. So now here we will be discussing the question and answers of the poem. So the first question is, identify the rhythmic scheme used in the poem Neutral Tones. That I already told you, it is ABBA. What is referred to as tedious in the second stanza? So Hardy creates a vivid image of a fed up attitude to what is occurring when he says that your eyes that rove over tedious riddles. So this highlights a lack of attention and a lack of interest as the characters revisit problems solved years ago. What is described as God crust in the final stanza of the poem? So in the last stanza, Hardy refers to the sun as God cursed. So this depicts a change in Hardy's feeling about love from beginning of the poem. His language starts to show anger rather than sadness. So curse means baddua dena. How does the speaker describe the sun? So the speaker continues to describe the scenery, explaining that the sun was white as though chidden of God, so scolded by God. This is an interesting way to describe the sun. While the sun is usually what brings light and warmth, but in this description it is simply described as being white, bleach white. Describe the setting of the poem Neutral Tones. So Thomas Hardy's neutral tone is about the neutrality of feelings and passivity of a lady. So the beauty of this poem lies in the use of imagery and most importantly the colors. Neutral Tones is ostensibly about the narrator's feeling regarding a breakup. Do you think Neutral Tones is suitable title for this poem? Neutral Tones is an expression of emotional trauma, and it argues that some emotional events leave a mark on a memory that cannot be erased. So in this poem, pain dulls over time to become a kind of melancholic boredom in which the memory of the event is an unwelcome constant in the mind of the speaker. So some events in this life, the poem argues, can never be completely overcome. So the next question is, according to the speaker, what are the keen lessons of life that he or she has learned? So Neutral Tone is a melancholic poem that looks at the dying moments of the relationship between the speaker and his or her lover. Defeated in tone, the poem shows the way in which love contains the possibilities of loss. So it also demonstrates how this loss can completely alter a person's perception of the world and the person they once loved. So through the example of the speaker and the speaker's lover, the poem shows how embracing the love always involves risking painful loss and estrangement, and it even suggests that all love might inherently be deceptive. So in the ninth line, the poet uses the superlative deadest. What is the significance of this? So the speaker then mentioned the ex-lover's smile on the particular day, describing it as almost dead, but with just enough life left to allow it to finally die in this moment. It was a bitter smile which the speaker compares to a fearsome bird taking a flight. So the next question is, how does Hardy bring out the cold bitterness of lovers' last meeting? Discuss the various devices used by the poet. So the speaker captures a very specific moment in the poem, the death of the love between two people. Though the reader doesn't know anything about the history of the relationship, including the gender of the speaker or the lover, the speaker creates a vivid, detailed depiction of exactly what the couple's loss looks like. So in the sense, the reader is an uncomfortable voyeur in the poem. The speaker is talking directly to his or her ex-lover as shown by the use of second person. So basically he has used different devices, different imageries, where he has used example of sun, and further he emphasizes on a pond, winter, bitterness, from which he has explained that these particular things explains bitterness, things in his love journey. So once the poem has established an important atmosphere of complete pain and heartbreak, the speaker returns to the image of the first stanza. So this emphasizes that even as the end of the relationship causes a return to reality, it also traps the speaker within all of this pain. So this is a journey that has led the speaker back to the beginning with only the lesson that love deceives to show for it. Love deceives argues the poem because it masks the risk of loss that comes with any relationship. So the next question is, in neutral tones, descriptions of the natural setting help establish a psychological landscape of the poem. Explain this in your own words. So the poem establishes itself as a memory from the outset. First revisiting the initial event, the conversation at the pond in the winter, and then showing the way that its emotional trauma has continued to influence the speaker's mindset. The poem takes place in the past tense, instantly setting the poem up as a description of somewhat distant events. So within this memory, almost all the particulars are linked to the senses. So the speaker remembers the whiteness of sun, the dryness of earth, the particular arc of the address's smile. All of this contribute to a stark and a vivid picture that makes the memory seem as real in the poem's present as it was at the time when the event occurred. So these vibrant, if sorrowful, descriptions demonstrate how the poet remains alive even though its presence is a negative, pessimistic force in the speaker's mind. So neutral tones does not offer a hopeful ending. Instead, it demonstrates the trauma of a strong negative emotion and it affects on an individual's psychology. So in fourth short stanza, the speaker draws out the way in which memory is not only something that people have but also something that happens to them. There is resigned lack of agency in speaker's neutral tones that implies a powerlessness with no easy solution, a devastating memory that will always hold a place in speaker's mind and therefore in his whole life. So this is the story and the poem and the betrayal and that love always deceived by Thomas Hardy.